is Professor Dr. Thomas Mark Nemeth, Professor of Theology of the Eastern Churches at the Catholic Faculty of the University of Vienna and priest of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. He is going to speak on an Eastern Catholic approach to Catholic-Orthodox ecumenism.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, Reverend Fathers, dear ladies and gentlemen, I am very thankful to have been invited to speak at this conference about the Orthodox Catholic dialogue from an Eastern Catholic perspective. As we know, Eastern Orthodox, Eastern Catholic dialogue has been mostly neglected for a long time in the official ecumenical dialogue, but it has already a history. So this issue was part of regional dialogues like in the Middle East or the Kievan Study Group. And in 2019, Eastern Orthodox and Eastern Catholic theologians from all over the world met in Stuttgart for a conference and contributed to the 2 volumes publication, Stolen Churches or Bridges to Orthodoxy, Ecumenical and Practical Perspectives on the Orthodox and Eastern Catholic Dialogue, and Historical and Theological Perspectives. So I have the book here with me. I am a co-chair of this Orthodox Eastern Catholic Dialogue Group together with Vladimir Latinovic, who edited the mentioned book with Anastasia Wooden, and I also published a paper related to the topic about which I am talking now. Also, a book edited in 2022 by Peter de May, Jaroslav Skira, and Hermann Teule with the title The Catholic Church and its Sister Churches 25 Years After Balamand, shows that the relation between Eastern Orthodox churches and Eastern Catholic churches is very important for ecumenism in general. Of course, this relation is a difficult topic, but there seem to be also increasing good relations between members of our churches. And the title of this conference, Eastern Catholic Ecumenical Vision in Dialogue with the Orthodox, is an invitation to look at this relationship. It seems important even in the light of the Council of Crete, which favors an honest dialogue in ecumenical matters. This can be an argument that the relation to the Eastern Catholic churches cannot be reduced only to the dialogue with the Roman See. Dialogue has many aspects, and one of its general problems are stereotypes about the other side. So this is already an important reason that Orthodox and Eastern Catholics should communicate with each other. The war of Russia against Ukraine shows local and practical reasons for dialogue. I'm serving as an Ukrainian Greek Catholic priest in Austria, and the war against Ukraine affects pastoral work. So we Ukrainian Greek Catholic priests meet now more Orthodox Christians. There is certain parallelism, sometimes even concurrency between our churches, but migration can bring also people together, and if Christians act together, this can be also relevant for the churches concerned. And also in many home countries, Orthodox and Eastern Catholic Christians often share a common life, which can be more specific than the coexistence with the Roman Catholics, but it has maybe also more complex relationship and perception by the other side. There is a big gap between this connection on the one hand and the great distance, at least on the official level. And behind both stand experiences, narratives, paradigms, which require understanding them. And I have the hope that the increasing relationship in academic life can help to resolve problems. As an Eastern Catholic theologian, I see different fields which require a closer look to make such a dialogue fruitful. One important question is that of a need of such a dialogue, and who are or who should be partners of the Orthodox Catholic dialogue in general. The long-standing name Joint International Commission for Theological Dialogue between the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church stems from the fact that the Orthodox partners insist on the attribute Roman for the Catholic side. So you are Roman if you are in communion with the Roman See, but this does not reflect Catholic ecclesiology. After Vatican II, it is clear that the Catholic Church is a communion of churches of Western and Eastern tradition, and that the adjective Roman does not suit to Eastern Catholics. There are other questions standing behind this issue, and as we see, there is not always a common narrative. I mean, this is true for the notion of uniatism, which is based on paradigmas of the past, which require re-examination more than 30 years after Ballamand. So the very general term uniatism does not fully reflect historical processes of so-called unions and their ecclesiological context, as we see. Also, from Orthodox side, John Erickson stated that uniatism is too heterogeneous as a concept, and we know uniatism also does not capture the reality of Eastern Catholic churches, which should be decisive. Sometimes even uniatism seems to be used intentionally to prevent approachment, so we have to think about this. One problem regarding uniatism seems to be that also the theological reception of Vatican II in Eastern Catholic churches, which take place in different velocities. And also Eastern Catholic churches have to find a place in the ecumenical movement, which has also been prevented sometimes from outside. There is a broad consensus that the concept of uniatism, which Ballamand rejects, cannot be a method anymore today, of course, but it should be noted that Ballamand also advocates the inclusion of Eastern Catholic churches in the dialogue, raises the question of finding mutual principles for this dialogue. However, we know also that Ballamand also offers very vague guidelines for theological dialogue itself, so we have still to work on it. One important insight from the recent dialogue could be that Eastern Catholic churches cannot be regarded as bridges between Orthodox and Catholicism. That's not only my opinion, also my former Major Archbishop Lubomir Husar refused this because it makes Eastern Catholic churches to an object instead of being a subject. However, if Eastern Catholic churches are churches sharing the same dignity in the Catholic ecclesial communion, they cannot be regarded as an object of negotiation. And I agree with Father Edward Farrugia, who told that the unionist formula ultimately failed because it wanted to solve the problems by oppressing part of the tension which forms an equation and ignore the others as full part. End of quotation. However, from such a point of view, the Ballamand Declaration seems problematic, arguing that we Eastern Catholics have the right to exist mainly because of freedom of conscience. Discussions whether Eastern Catholic churches should decide becoming part of the Latin Church or join Orthodox churches not only ignore ecclesiology of one partner, but are expressions of a kind of totalitarian thinking. And if we look impact of ideology on Russian Orthodoxy in the current war against Ukraine, such attempts might be dangerous. So let me say frankly, Eastern Catholic churches do not have to decide where they belong. They are not children who have to ask their parents what they have to do. I mean, I see really a need to overcome a bipolar thinking, Catholics versus Orthodox, and maybe a historical approach might be helpful here, because such a confessional dualism is not such an old phenomenon. It is neither true for the first millennium nor for the Uni of Brest. Instead, we find complex processes of interaction between local and regional churches and its centers, which conflicts, but there is also cooperation. The recent Alexandria document of the official Orthodox Catholic dialogue, Synodality and Primacy in the second millennium and today, speaks quite unpolemically about the modern church unions, but one must also see what is missing. A common reading has not yet been achieved. And I see a problem on both sides. Eastern Catholic churches should not regard themselves simplifying as the best existing solution for unity, but an idea that is still often widespread among the clergy. But Eastern Catholic churches also should not be discriminated as an ecclesiological anomaly, as this ignores that all churches concerned are together part of an anomalous situation. But there is little point in projecting idle concepts backwards. Such anomalies might be even seen as the usual case. In the first millennium, we see that churches can share communion despite certain ecclesiological dissent or unresolved issues. A question important for us Eastern Catholic churches has been also raised from Orthodox side by Pantelis Kalatsaidis. If really the uniates are the main problem for Orthodoxy, is this the case, or are there other issues behind it? This can refer to certain forms of ecumenism or unresolved historical traumata. They exist on both sides, and one aim of the mentioned dialogue group, Orthodox Eastern Catholic dialogue group, is to bring both sides together to search for a common reading. I just came now from the conference of Pro Oriente in Vienna, Healing of Wounded Memories, which shows that there is really a need to raise our listening capacity to each other. It might be a chance perhaps to find possibilities to start writing histories together, so that things lose their conflict potential, or to find collective positive stories. And also, the question how we speak about others is an important issue for our clergy if I look into social media. The conference about the Catholic Saint Josaphat just finished here at PO. It might be interesting to know whether there were approaches that help to overcome stereotypes, but maybe we can hear about this later. While the clergy of Eastern Catholic churches, within the clergy of Eastern Catholic churches, there are different approaches to ecumenical thinking, and much depends on what the church leadership and the bishops communicate internally regarding this. I mean, some Eastern Catholic churches show a tendency towards rapprochement with Orthodoxy. Some emphasize more the status quo, or even consciously distance themselves from Orthodoxy and its traditions. The principle in Orientalium Ecclesiarum 6, ad avitas traditiones redire, is still contested. For example, I wrote about this in an article. It is problematic for me when the particular law of my church stipulates that the liturgy of the presanctified gifts is to be celebrated on weekdays during Great Lent, where one bishop argues against this, and this norm is often not observed by priests either. Sometimes Eastern Catholic churches emphasize being true Eastern churches, but this is also challenged by hybridism. So our Orthodox partners, if they listen now, should not only look at positive figureheads, but also at what is being done inside the churches. And there should not be underestimated that there is still a Latinizing mindset. And well, the hope that this will diminish as a result of increasing theological education has, in my opinion, only partially came true. Also in Eastern Catholic churches, sometimes young clergy seem often to be narrow in the spectrum of their views, maybe more conservative, and this seems to encourage also Latinizing tendencies and not exactly ecumenical openness. So this would have also to be investigated, but should be considered how to deal with it. Another important aspect refers now to the Orthodox side. Can there be an acceptable role of mission of Eastern Catholic churches also for them? And firstly, I think one important aspect is to be accepted as part of the Catholic Church, what Eastern Catholics want to be. According Unitatis Redintegratio 17, Eastern Catholic churches have a fourfold heritage: liturgical, canonical, spiritual, and also theological one. And important for me is the last aspect. It isn't simply there isn't simply one Catholic theology, it is pluralistic, and it has to take into account the heritage not only of the Latin Church, but also of the Eastern churches. So inner Catholic pluralism is a door to dialogue, and it has not been fully explored in what way Eastern and Western tradition can truly coexist. It is not always clear whether some theological issues are fixed simply by the common Catholic faith, or are there only certain expressions of, in a way, dominated by a Latin majority, but also open for complementary views. If we look at the practice, some Eastern Catholic churches, as the Hungarian, celebrate officially Saint Gregory Palamas, and the theologians sympathize with his theology. Others don't regard this as a part of their tradition, and often we find also different views in the same church. Now, a short remark about the notorious F word, the filioque. It is a difficult example. There are very ambivalent approaches to it. I mean, Eastern Catholic churches could be pioneers also in taking the hermeneutics of complementarity of Vatican II seriously, really seriously. And there are approaches. The Catechism of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church has chosen a non-filioquistic theological approach. At the same time, the filioque is mentioned there in square brackets without specifying what this means. And also on a practical level, let's say hierarchs who speak very firmly when it comes to certain moral issues avoid to explain the ecumenical relevance of the filioque topic. Also, the fact that the text of the Professio Fidei, the Creed, contains the filioque also for Eastern Catholic theologians shows that still a monolithic concept of Latin theology is still dominating. I mean, to leave Eastern Catholic theologians here not the choice is somehow to let them act against legitimate theological diversity, which I see also as an encroachment. I would like to stress theology can contribute to contextualize a doctrine of faith which does not exist simply in transtemporal categories but is linked to certain concepts which can be discussed. And remaining on the level of communication and argumentation, theology can also open the way for learning processes. Another issue is church autonomy. Eastern Catholic churches are sui juris churches, which differs from the Orthodox concept of autocephaly and autonomy, but implies autonomy and synodality, which does not exist in this way in the Latin Church. So Eastern Catholic Church could be advocates of principles in the Catholic koinonia, such principles which can help this church to understand orthodoxy better and pave a path to more synodality. In Orthodoxy, Eastern Catholic churches are often regarded as a sign of disunity, and in a historical perspective, this is true, seeing the destructive impact of unions. One reason behind this was a soteriological exclusivism by the Roman See, and it influenced also Orthodoxy, but has been diminished in Catholic ecclesiology after Vatican II. Today, inside the Catholic Church, Eastern Catholic churches link autonomy with unity, even if we cannot deny that all of these churches have kind of internal tensions between pro-Western and pro-Eastern tendencies, but they can still live with that, and Rome can live with them. When Major Archbishop Sviatoslav Shevchuk openly expressed his disappointment about the Havana Declaration or about the Pope's statements regarding Russia, people realized in Ukraine that it is possible to express even disagreement in church politics and keep unity in faith. And in today's pluralistic world, the possibility of different views inside the church can also be a positive sign, and Eastern Catholic churches witness the need of mutual recognition of others to be in communion. In the mentioned volume, Stolen Churches, Dimitrios Keremidas, who will speak later, stressed that the Eastern Catholic churches can be a bridge inside the Catholic Church, sharing diversity, autonomy, and communion. And that's important for me, being bridges inside the Catholic Church. In the same book, also Radu Bordeanu noted that Eastern Catholic churches could teach a way towards a church that is neither the Catholic nor the Orthodox one in the present form. So they are somehow linked to unity, however, to one which is currently not manifested in its fullness. We know that Orthodox Church unity is now a big challenge, but also in the Catholic Church, we face currently problems of internal polarization. Theological reductionism is a big danger. For example, one example is the book From the Deeps of Our Hearts by Cardinal Robert Sarah, arguing from an ontological priest celibacy, leaving Eastern Catholic churches only as a tolerated anomaly, and regrettably also the more moderate contribution by the former Pope Benedict XVI seem to play into the hands of those who want a revival of a Prestantia Ritus Latini. And the question is, do Orthodox really want such a Latin Church as a counterpart? As an Eastern Catholic theologian, I still see the danger. 5 minutes?
Well, the time.
I'm already at as an Eastern Catholic theologian, I see the danger of new barriers for the dialogues with the Orthodox Church through such a kind of approach. And there is a challenge for them, but it's important that Eastern Catholic Church do not tend to extreme position. They keep in mind both Catholic teaching, but also Orthodox theology and patristic roots. On the other hand, Eastern Catholic churches often lack of dialogue with other Eastern churches to help to develop a more critical self-view. So, concluding, it's interesting to look also which aspects of the role of Eastern Catholic churches inside the Catholic communion might be relevant for the Orthodox side. Edward Siecinski referred to 3 which seem worth to be considered. Firstly, spoke here about the critical role inside of Catholicism, so Eastern Catholic churches can be a loyal opposition. Secondly, referring to the idea of exploring the possibility of a dual communion, a kind of via media, as for example the Sorbi initiative, although this is not realistic for a moment. And thirdly, he refers that Eastern Catholic churches could be a canary in the coal meaning that they can be a test to show the Orthodox how Rome would deal with them. Of course, all 3 plans have the limits and problems, but we have to think what serves unity. And this is also a practical issue referring to both sides. So I would like to finish with the statement that we should support both ecumenism of life and of academic life, which can be supported by theologians of both sides and help to deepening unity. And Eastern Catholic churches should especially develop their role to be bridges within the Catholic Church for developing of ecumenism. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm glad for feedback.
Well, Father Nemeth, you are first of all in perfect time. Okay, so I also was intrigued by a number of questions, but I prefer that others make their comments. We have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nemeth, for your paper. I have just a small question. You mentioned the Alexandria document, and I would like to ask you whether you could explain a bit more what you would have included with regard to the Eastern Catholic churches. And my second point would be, you mentioned the project of writing history together, which I appreciate very much. And I know that there was a process already at the beginning, at least of the 20th century in Vienna, to write a history in former Yugoslavia together, which lasted for quite some time. Whether you know more, or at least I would refer to that initiative, to that experience we had already. So thank you.
Should I answer now immediately, or do we collect questions?
Maybe it's better if you answer now.
Yeah. Oh, regarding the Alexandria document, this would be a long topic, but somehow I have the feeling that not always a common narrative has been achieved. So the Catholic part says something, the Orthodox part says something, and the part about the unions is very short. And I heard, but you participated, that were maybe a longer text, but there were some debates, and you could not find to say a common way, so you just reduced this to these short statements. But still, a way finding answers how to go on with this question is for me somehow missing. Also, when we look at the second millennium, there is a bit the tendency that the Orthodox simply developed their synodality and the Catholics did a lot of things wrong. So this is also maybe a view which, I mean, how to say, it still needs to work about it. And yes, I would be also glad to hear more in what way Eastern Catholic churches were part of the discussions, but unfortunately I'm not a member of this commission, but maybe we can hear more about this later during this conference. And common narrative, I mean, to work on history together, this is one important issue of Pro Oriente, and we will continue this way. And also, I mean, I spoke about the Orthodox Eastern Catholic Dialogue Group. We will still continue our work, and we also think maybe to go on a regional level and to find positive examples where ecumenism works, so that could be inspiring also for others to continue this path.
Yes, any other, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian Butcher, McGill University, Canada. Vielen Dank. On this question of common narrative or common retelling of history, how important do you think it is for Orthodox among themselves, speaking now just of Eastern Orthodox, to be able to do that? It seems to me that Moscow and Constantinople cannot agree on a common narrative with respect to their respective prerogatives, and even in a reading of the historical sources with respect to the now the autocephaly of the Church, Orthodox Church in Ukraine. And so one wonders if even two churches that are sharing the same faith, have been in communion and prize that unity, cannot agree on their history a fortiori. How difficult is it for them to find a common way of telling the history with the Oriental Orthodox or even with the Catholics? So where exactly does that start, I suppose, and how optimistic are you if one looks at the current state of even the Orthodox communion, whether this project of the retelling of history can in fact obtain? Thank you.
Well, what you said, it makes dialogue difficult, of course, but also very interesting, because these are exactly the points where we still need to come together, and also the Orthodox to think about communio and the differences and the problems within them. But I am not Orthodox, so I cannot tell about this perspective more. But for us Catholics, it's really a challenge. I mean, to have a partner, of course, who has kind of different churches, not in full communion with each other, and such discourses, well, yes, that will be a challenge.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
Well, thank you, Thomas, for your interesting speech. If I understood Father McPartlin's plead, he was actually pleading for a sort of reinterpretation or reactivation of the bridge metaphor, isn't it? In terms of synodality. Whereas you are pleading for dispensing with the bridge metaphor when it comes to the Orthodox, but still sticking to it when it comes to the Catholic Church. So what are the implications of those, I would say, interpretations and reinterpretations and reservations towards the bridge metaphor. What do you mean by being a bridge within the Roman or within the Catholic Church? And do you see any possibility for the Eastern Catholics for a critical assessment of what they have been saying all over 2 centuries, that they were more or less bridges between the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church?
Well, the Orthodox churches do not accept Eastern Catholic churches as bridges to them. So if one partner refuses, this is a clear sign that this is a problematic concept. And but also the Eastern Catholics recognized, as Major Archbishop Husar said, that you can go over a bridge, but then you have a passive role. So Eastern Catholics think about being mediators. This is of course a question how the Orthodox will accept this. And I just think one common consensus, I think, could be what Dimitrios Keramidas said, that we should stress more the role of Eastern Catholic churches inside their own communion, because they can contribute to a movement towards orthodoxy by showing pluralism also in theological matters, because this is a field which has not been fully explored in many fields. I mean, we sometimes can discuss about some theological concept. Are they here the Catholics, they are the Orthodox, or do we even have both of them inside of the Catholic Church? And if we have this on the base of a common tradition, then we can try to find bridges also to orthodoxy, but it can be only a bridge from the whole Catholic side, otherwise we get back the problems of partial union. So that would be maybe a first answer.
Thank you. Now, thank you for an interesting and informative paper, but now we have to pass